All right, we are back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, the running backs have now taken back control of their own destinies in regards to their long-term contracts. Stark contrast from how it was a few years ago. There was a lot of that going on around this time. But of course, there are other training camp news to get into. So we start with an injury where, according to Adam Schefter, as most of these developments are coming from, Jalon Walker was initially feared to have suffered a torn ACL, and it was confirmed. So he will end up missing the rest of the season. It is unfortunate. He's the second edge rusher, if you will, when you go back to the Nick Scarton report to enter this specific situation. Also a fellow rookie drafted in 2025 with the first pick the Falcons had in that draft prior to trading for the 27th overall pick in that same draft to get the man who was this close, dangerously close to potentially losing his entire career. Jalon Walker, as a fellow rookie edge rusher in that system, was partially responsible for their overall rise on that defense, helping a team that largely had little sack production over the few years leading up to those selections to then turn into one of the better pass rushing units in the NFL, despite the mediocrity of the team overall. And with that, they were able to force a higher amount of takeaways. They made themselves very formidable in at least a few games, and they had an outside chance of winning the title all the way down to the end of the season in regards to the conference. Not a Super Bowl, just the division title. Okay? As simple as that. Jalon Walker, for his credit, got non-starts on the year and appeared in 15 games while forcing 2 fumbles, notching a pass deflection, recovering a fumble, and producing 5.5 sacks with 36 overall tackles on the year. So while it might not have been the same kind of rookie of the year caliber campaign as his fellow running mate James Pierce Jr. had, it was great enough to, at the very least, inject a bit more juice and energy in this Falcons defense. Something that they would look to carry forward, especially in this season. Because, at the very least, if they've got a strong defense, the way that some of these teams have performed over the past few years, you look at notably franchises like the Steelers, the Browns, as long as you carve out a very good defense that plays high-end football in and out of every single week, you give yourself a chance to win a lot of these games. And the Falcons would desperately need to lean on that, because even they aren't so sure about their quarterback situation right now. The best way for them to move forward is to lean on the talent that they already have on the offensive end and have a bit more trust in this defense that they are trying to build. Walker would be a huge part of that. And if things had gone a certain way in James Pierce Jr.'s situation, they'd be looking to him to take the next step. Unfortunately, with this injury, one that, again, when it comes to lower leg injuries, there is just very little you can do to repair that part of a person's body in such a short amount of time. So it's customary to see an individual miss a full month, multiple months even, throughout the course of a season trying to recover. And then, even after that gets done, you get your surgery, you have to relearn some of the basic steps just to move around on a consistent basis before you can even consider playing the sport of football once again. Walker would be entering his age 22 season, so he's a very young player. And to have to go through this early on in the cycle is just incredibly unfortunate, to say the least. But knowing the caliber of player he was at Georgia, he is a guy that is more than capable of, shaking back from the injury, recovering to the fullest extent, and making sure that come next season in 2027, when he may be set to appear again, or maybe he finds a solution like some others have had over the past few years where he can accelerate the process to have a much quicker recovery date than the standard 12-month timeline. Either way, he'll be ready to go next season. I can guarantee you that much. So it's tough for Jalon Walker right now, and the defense will certainly take a hit for it. When you have rookies on both sides of the edge producing pressure rates at the respective levels they did, it changed the complexion of how their season was going to go. It changed the outlook that the defense had for themselves. And that would be something positive to carry over into this season. They were most certainly trying to build off of that. And, a wrench in the form of an injury that you have no control over just finds its way into the overall dissolution of the plan. That's just, there's not much you can do about that. Hopefully he can recover. Moving on from that, though, into one of the major contract extensions. And no, it doesn't involve a running back, but it involves a player who honestly benefited from that a lot. And that would be the Bears' Darnell Wright, left tackle, drafted in 2023, as he was given a 4-year, $116 million contract extension with $93 million guaranteed, which I think they said was one of the highest guarantees per tackle in NFL history, if not the highest. I could be wrong on that. I was trying to go around and see if that was the case. It's an early birthday present for him. He turns 25 entering that age season on August 10th, just a few days from now. So to have that go down earlier in the week must have been very great news for him and anybody surrounding him at this point, whether it be family members, close friends of his, because again, that is generational wealth for one player. And it's interesting progression for Darnell Wright. This was a dude in 2023 that honestly, after watching him throughout the rookie season, I wasn't really sold. Now, you could chalk that up to how the Bears were structured as a team overall, the weird seasons that Justin Fields had as the quarterback for that team, being more of a runner of the football compared to an adept enough passer. There might have been a bit of a mutual loss and detriment taking place. Like, yes, Justin Fields, as the fans there were clamoring for a quarterback change, okay? He clearly wasn't the guy. And is going to put a lot of pressure on the offensive line to have to hold their blocks for so much time, knowing that all Justin Fields was going to do was hold on to the ball whenever he didn't have his first progression down and just cycle through this long-ass time of going through each and every single one before ultimately just feeling too much pressure and then deciding to bail into an instant scramble. That's how it would work. At the same time, Darnell Wright, being a rookie thrown into the fire with a team led by Matt Eberflus, who clearly didn't know what the hell he was doing, there's naturally going to be a bit of a growing pain there as well. You're not expected to come in, even at the age of 22, and be prepared to perform at an elite level with a Bears team that kind of meddled around and was considered as one of the worst teams in the league. So it took some time for him to really mature into that role, but it's safe to say that since that time, he has done a largely great job of exactly that. Wright has consistently seen himself involved in the offense, and I mean, he genuinely is great at what he does. He had done a decent job of protecting Caleb Williams throughout the year, which you would expect by his third season at this point. I find that his value is a lot better in how they performed in the rushing game. You pair up the idea of them having the offseason they did last year to revamp that entire offensive line, and it turned Darnell Wright into a huge focal point of that offense. Before you knew it, the Bears turned themselves into one of the best rushing teams in football, behind the likes of the two-headed monster of Short Kings and Kyle Munningai and DeAndre Swift last season. Wright was largely responsible for that. So to see him incur a massive payday as a result of that, knowing that the free agents they signed in Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney instantly got their money when they first got there, it allows the Bears to keep that core together. And they expect that, hey, we're just going to continue running over teams. If there is one thing that is not going to change at all about what we do on the offensive end, it is the element of overall versatility and creativity from the run game to open up the pass game. That's how Ben Johnson has done this his entire career as an offensive coordinator and now the head coach of his team. So Darnell Wright, from that standpoint, he fits right in to what the Bears are trying to establish. The deal itself does seem a little crazy for Darnell Wright, though, considering all the things I had previously said. But he truly has grown from that rookie season, as you would want a player to do. You know, like, yes, you're going to have those rookies that just hit the ground running and go ballistic in their first year and then continue to tail off. No, Darnell Wright might have had a very slow start, but he's consistently trended upward and has progressed in the right direction since that period of time. As the team around him has also gotten better. It was customary that he would see a deal like this coming. So all the power to him for securing such a deal as this. It is well-deserved, and, you know, there isn't much of a complaint to be had about it from my end. I can totally understand why the Bears would do it. Now the question is, again, yes, they will shoot to run the football and mash it through defenses relentlessly this upcoming season. Will they find the same success? Will they truly be able to keep that trend going as one of the more aggressive rushing teams in the NFL? And will it be as effective as it was? Because, again, the yards per rush that both Munengai and Swift had combined, they were also one of the top marks in the NFL. And if that is steady, along with the threat of Caleb Williams possibly running the football, when you look at reports about him slimming down a little bit and working on his speed. If he was already considered a dual threat quarterback, you could see that man literally taking it back to some of the days he had at Oklahoma as a rusher. And that is scary for the NFL if that happens. Expect Darnell Wright to leak out for each and every single one of those blocks if that does proceed to happen. But moving on from that, the Lions signed Raheem Blackshear, a former return specialist for the Panthers, and honestly, it serves as a bit of insurance. I think they mentioned that Isaiah Pacheco was going through like a brief injury and trying to recover from that. It's not something that appears to affect his availability for the regular season in an extreme way. I think it's just the notion of, hey, like getting a third running back on your team, making sure that you're set up for great success in the regular season to have enough bodies on the roster. Because I think up to this time, it's been just Gibbs and Pacheco in that backfield. They hadn't really done a lot to add to that specific core. So Blackshear is not a guy who will see a lot of the reps as is, but again, his value is mainly a return specialist. So he should be a pretty good one for this Lions team. And they could bear to use it. They have used Sione Vaki as well. And even he, who tends to play a bit of split running back and safety reps, going back to his time at Utah. Well, yeah, Pacheco's there. Maybe it was Vaki that they mentioned. Yeah, I had to correct myself. It was Vaki that they mentioned was dealing with an injury that took him out. And with it being Pacheco out there participating in these team practices, as well as the fact that up to this point, the elephant in the room for the Lions hadn't been addressed yet. And as a result, one of their marquee players was sitting out. So, of course, you don't want to have just one running back out there testing their work on the field. You need as many bodies as possible. You know, you're obviously going to get down to a 53-man roster eventually before the start of the regular season. That doesn't mean it has to be that way right now, and honestly, it's not viable to do so. Puts a massive burden on all those other players to have to strenuate themselves consistently throughout this training camp process, and knowing that the ones who are guaranteed to make the starting roster are pretty much intact. That's a taxing assignment to give them. So bringing in Blackshear is fairly smart. And again, it's just to make sure, hey, we have someone in these preseason games getting the reps. This is a time for Blackshear. In his mindset, right, he probably is trying to shoot for a roster spot. This man has not played in the NFL since 2024, so there aren't better opportunities to work your way back into the NFL than a situation like this to come about. And who knows, if he proceeds to perform well in the preseason games, maybe the Lions give him a chance. Maybe a different team out there gives him another opportunity to play in this league. You have to think that way. If you are a player on the fringe entering a preseason, you have to think that way. Your odds of making a roster might be slim, and it is magnified in regards to what you do in the preseason and how it may affect that particular movement and that, totem pole. You have to perform as best as you possibly can, because every single play matters, every single rep on that field matters. If you are this close to either affirming your spot on the roster or potentially getting knocked out for another guy on the bubble. Blackshear has a lot of work to do, and if he can get it done, hey, the chances are he gets himself back into the league, but only time will tell, and the course of the next 3 preseason games for the Lions, depending on how much time he proceeds to get. But moving in from that into some contract signings in general, ultimately progressing to all the extensions. Firstly, Washington proceeded to do the smartest thing they could have done in light of everything else going on the social media, as Adam Peters had to laugh off and address. They would sign Stefon Diggs to a 1-year contract worth up to $12 million, which is very smart for them. Stefon Diggs, to his credit, worked himself into this position. He played spectacularly for the Patriots last season when he was on the field. Did that happen in the Super Bowl? No, he was clamped up. But as a vocal leader of the team, and as one who seemed to progress and help accelerate Drake May's development into being a runner-up for MVP last season, yeah, I'd say it's a pretty good thing to have him on the team as a fellow player of yours, regardless of people calling him a diva when he was with the Bills, or regardless of how he expresses himself in many different ways. He's a good teammate to have in this instance. And Jaden Daniels himself, even being one of the older quarterbacks in the 2024 draft, 2023, he's also someone that could use such a boost. Like Daniels himself, 2024. He himself had honestly rode the highs of his rookie season coming into 2025, and honestly, why would he not? It was a spectacular turnaround for Washington. They made the playoffs. They had an opportunity to get themselves all the way to the damn divisional round. They were on cloud 9. And conference championship game, my bad. But yeah, no, you get that far and you're thinking that a season like that can ultimately compound into another year of high level play and great success for you. And you're ecstatic as a Commanders fan in what is dubbed as the comeback season, and a one of the best rookie seasons of all time by many different people. Then you get into 2025, where really, on the outside, Terry McLaurin was the only weapon. Your second best option in Zach Ertz proceeded to get hurt. And Jaden Daniels himself was banged up throughout the year because of those struggles. Having Stefon Diggs here, and even hearing some of the stuff he said, Stefon Diggs is willing to take on a number 2 role. That is exactly what the Commanders need. Antonio Williams can ultimately progress into a very good wide receiver for this team. They drafted him in this draft, I believe in the 4th round, I want to say. So Williams is a very good player coming out of Clemson as a wide receiver. Kind of slight, but, he's definitely someone to look forward to having on this team in the long run. And they drafted him in the 3rd round, just to make sure. So you have that go on, but to have him aligned as a number 2 so early might not be the smartest decision. Okay, you bring in a veteran who will be 33 years old on November 29th, just coming off a 1,000-yard year, to consistently move the chains and put this team in the right direction when he's out there on the field. Like, that's a smart acquisition for them. It alleviates some of the pressure that Jaden Daniels will have, knowing that, hey, even if he doesn't have the first progression, there's always going to be a chance for him to find another read if need be. And then you also have the burden being taken off of Terry McLaurin, who was somewhat disrespected around the same time last year in regards to the negotiations surrounding his future contract, proceeded to get it, and then had to go through hell and back just to produce on the football field. Because that man would see so much coverage crowded solely on him, knowing that he was the only vertical threat they had down the field. And that even with Zach Ertz being another option, he's not going to burn you. Zach Ertz is more of a guy who's going to fit right in as a guy killing it through all the soft spots in the zone. And he's good for a possession catch every now and then to Moss defenders. But he does not have that kind of speed on him. And frankly, never did. Probably had more athleticism in his younger years. But you're not getting that out of Zach Ertz. You're still getting that dog mentality from Stefon Diggs. That's exactly what this team needs. That injection of spirit and culture that the Commanders have been working towards since Dan Snyder, that terrorist, okay, since he left. You know what I'm saying? You have to do something to shift the focus and the timeline of this organization. And Diggs fits right into that mold. So you have to give the Commanders all their due for making this decision. It had to be done. And, it does make them right now a little bit better than they were expected to be. It was also fitting because, again, Diggs is a hometown kid. He attended Maryland at College Park for university before getting drafted in 2015. Obviously born and raised in Gaithersburg, so his ties to the area are very well documented through the course of his entire NFL career. And, it's a 1-year deal. The Commanders could do with him whatever they choose after this season, depending on how it goes. If he plays well, even if he doesn't, they could make the decision to either extend him for some more time on a short-term deal, or they could let him walk. Whatever the case may be, because there's nothing guaranteed right now, if this were to be the last stop for Stefon Diggs in his career, and he were to decide to call it a career after time in Washington, it would be a very fitting location for him to close that chapter of his time in the NFL and potentially in that segment of his life. Like, you can imagine just how many people who are relatives of his are probably still around Maryland as we speak, just awaiting an opportunity to see Stefon Diggs come back home and play in front of that home crowd. That is something genuinely invaluable that you can't take away from an athlete in Stefon Diggs who has honestly worked his ass off to get to this point. And honestly, have a pretty successful career. This man to this point, regardless of what people are saying, to be drafted in the 5th round and to currently be at almost 1,000 receptions on his career, over 11,500 yards, like I'd say that's a damn great career for any wide receiver ever. Yeah, maybe, the label on him is not the best. And granted, he owns some of that responsibility. The situation that unfolded that forced the Patriots' hand to release him for PR purposes. Ultimately, it was resolved and it was found that the cook, the friend with benefits, if you will, in this case, pretty much was found to be a dishonest individual and an unreliable narrator in the case, ultimately allowing Diggs to go off scot-free from the entire ordeal. You can argue that, yes, it was not particularly wise for Diggs to hire a person of which he was going to do those things with, and then have so much other baggage come with that, leading to a split that wasn't particularly great for either side, and reached that point, that level of accusation to where he had to go to court for it. That wasn't particularly smart. Also note as well, there's a lot of other things going around Stefon Diggs' name that have been the case for a year or so. The Commanders are still deciding that, hey, for at least a 1-year contract, it's worth all the risk in the world to make sure that we keep ourselves as competitive as possible, instead of just, lying down at the bottom of the NFL and just taking the brunt of all this firepower from all these other teams. We want some of that energy too. And we know that we're going to need it to keep up with the rest of the folks in the NFC. So, it's an aware move. It's not a decision that is without risk, but they know what they want to get out of the deal. And when you have that in your head, you're going to swing for it. You're going to do whatever it takes. Here, a 1-year deal for a man who just had a very successful season with this Patriots team to get all the way to the Super Bowl. I mean, that's a pretty damn good risk and worth it to me. Opposite of BA, as they so say. Because, we look at AB and we've seen and we've heard some of the craziness. He has said it is obvious that BA is a loser in this ordeal. This man had the gall to set up an event in preparation for a signing with the Commanders. He had the gall to go all the way to D.C. and buy a $9 million house in preparation for signing with the Commanders, thinking that it was a foregone conclusion that he could just somehow not sign his reinstatement papers, have the 49ers take him off their roster completely, as if they haven't already distanced themselves from his bullshit, that he could have the Commanders call his phone, pick him up, and have a done deal, while also talking smack about Jaden Daniels' mother and lifestyle. The nerve of the man. He has just spiraled into so many different directions that it's hard to keep track of exactly who he is trying to be at one moment of time. This is where BA currently sits. And all of it has left him in a scenario where with all the noise going on around Stefon Diggs, they still believed that it was a safer option to take him over a player in Brandon Ayuk, who also is coming off of a major injury, but is 4 years or so younger and has the same ability to dominate on the football field like Stefon Diggs does. Clearly the maturity lacks. And you can say that Stefon Diggs has a very expressive personality, but at least he's been able to settle down and help his teams out. While Brandon Ayuk not only does that, also tries to make a slight at Kyle Shanahan and joke about him being in a car accident. Do you really think the teams would want to do business with you after all of that? It's kind of difficult to really make that happen when you are doing everything in your own power to sabotage yourself and literally burn the bridges that are initially connected with you being there and now are non-existent after you're gone. BA, like this is all his doing. Like the Commanders chose, they had the full autonomy to make the decision that, hey, we could potentially take on the risk of having Brandon Ayuk on this team. They didn't want to deal with that shit. Why would they want to deal with that shit? Just gotta think about those questions. They are very small details, but they are worth everything in a situation like this. I just genuinely don't understand. Then you're going to see something else about Brandon Ayuk probably just a few minutes from now, depending on how frequently he chooses to post on Instagram. You can't escape it. He is literally, this is all in his mind, okay? He is trapped in his own head. And what we see on these Instagram clips are just the figment of his imagination. At this point, we can't really understand what's going on because he doesn't understand what's going on himself. Refuses to understand and acknowledge what he himself is doing. And, it's going to continue to hurt him. Because, again, when you're acting like that, as a player, in an era of player empowerment, to some extent, it's acceptable if the production surrounding your name is still there, if the talent surrounding your name is still there, if you've shown that you can be available, if you've shown that you can compromise as a player, if you've shown that you can still dominate and perform at a high level in any league that you're in, and this would apply more to the NBA, but yes, you're going to give yourself a fighting opportunity in any negotiation. Only a couple of those things are true for Brandon Ayuk right now. And admittedly, him coming off of a down year and an injury-riddled season would hurt his odds tremendously. Padding all of this on top of it makes it worse. There's no denying that. And so those are the reasons, along with his own, why he does not find himself with a team at this point and, has the potential to not even make a team leading up to this regular season. When he's been healthy, for a time there, he was actually on pace to be a spectacular wide receiver for the 49ers. Things change, circumstances change, and clearly the scale and the, direction of Ayuk's career has changed drastically over these last few seasons. So, hopefully he can turn things around. But in the meantime, they have Stefon Diggs. They chose their guy. They're going to look to get to work with him immediately as they try to get back to that 2024 form, if you will, or at least make themselves in this upcoming year a formidable opponent compared to whatever was going on last season. Health binding as well. Health truly matters for this team. But yeah, all that is going to factor into it. Moving on from that, though, to the first of the running back contract extensions. And it's fitting that the man himself would get his money. Because, per Adam Schefter and other sources, Jonathan Taylor signed a 2-year, $44 million contract extension, which is well-deserved. Like, I don't need to say anything more here. Jonathan Taylor, since he came from Wisconsin and entered the draft, has been one of the best running backs in this league, point blank, period. Titans killer every single time he faces off against them. Versatile in his own nature, and had a game last year where he not only set multiple records in an overtime win, but just thrashed the Falcons in London. Like, oh my gosh. Like, that game was just crazy. Or maybe not London. I think they played that. I'm tripping. I think they played that game in Germany. But yeah, you see those consistent performances from him. And yes, he'll have some down games every now and then. But that talent from him is just hard to pass up. Even in a year where, hey, you know, he had a few injuries in 2024. He's trying to turn it back all the way to what he did in 2021 that allowed him to, you know, get closer and closer to his first contract extension, right? He puts up a league-high 18 touchdowns. In a year where a lot of other running backs probably got more noise, he still was in the upper echelon of production amongst those guys. So when you're looking at it that way, Jonathan Taylor is very deserving of that contract. It does not make him a running back that reset the market for the position, but it does put him comfortably in that top 5 spot amongst active running backs when it comes to the structure of their deals. And, you know, you look at it that way, it is difficult to suggest otherwise. Like, genuinely. Yeah. Like, I just, every single time Jonathan Taylor is on that field, like, you just expect nothing but greatness to unfold for that man, bro. He is just truly a threat downhill, especially. You know, he can work himself into that power role for you. He does have the ability to move east to west if need be to shake off defenders. Like, you're not seeing players move around like that the way that Jonathan Taylor does and still have enough in him to be as elusive as he is on the field. And that does benefit him out of the backfield at times, even though he isn't regarded as one of the top running backs in the league, specifically in that role. It's not like it is something that he can't do, though. Like, he is genuinely solid at that as well. He's the full package. The Colts have obviously spent this entire offseason investing a lot in some of their core guys and keeping Jonathan Taylor, keeping a running back who is still so young, who is probably entering the prime of his career in this age 27 season, which is crazy to think. And again, yes, like, that is the conversation that some people will have. Running backs may peak early. The man is still showcasing that even in what was his 6th NFL season last year, that, yeah, he still can go off on the football field and just continue to be the difference maker in key matchups for this Colts team as a running back. You know, they make a lot of these moves in the wide receiver position and they invest heavily in Daniel Jones. But make no mistake, that offense runs through what Jonathan Taylor can do still to this point. And with not having Michael Pittman Jr. there, you can expect that to lean on him even more. He already led the league in rushes last season. So what is honestly stopping him from doing that again? Honestly, that's the scary part. What is stopping him from having a game like he did against the Falcons in Germany in November of that season? what is stopping him from having another game like that? Like, you don't see a lot of performances like he did in Week 10 from running backs all the time, at least. So whenever you have stuff happening like that, it's special. You just want to make sure that over the course of an entire season, it can spread out. That is one thing to note about this deal. And honestly, an argument that some people may have against it. Yes, that game against the Falcons in Week 10 of that year was great for them. Don't get the game fucked up. However, after that game, as the team became more and more predictable, and as they also lost Daniel Jones as such, they keyed more on what Jonathan Taylor was doing, and it rendered him ineffective for pretty much the rest of the year. He did not have a single game over 100 rushing yards for the rest of the season, let alone 90 yards. Each of the next 7 games on this timeline saw him go for at least 14 rushes, but just about 2 to 4 yards per carry. So you look at that if you're a Colts fan or if you're a guy trying to criticize the deal, and you do have a bit of question marks about that. Because at the very least, knowing the Colts didn't make the playoffs, you'd want to finish off the season strong, and you can argue that this is not what happened for the Colts or for Jonathan Taylor here. You can also argue that when you are dealing with teams like the Chiefs, the Texans, the Jaguars twice, and the Texans twice, the Seahawks as well, in those last 7 games, you're naturally going to struggle against teams who were all considered as top 10 defenses in the NFL at some point last season, especially with the Texans and the Seahawks. So you would give Jonathan Taylor a little bit of grace for that specifically. If this does continue into the start of the year, you could have a little bit of trouble with that. Not everybody can get off to a fast start. That's what everyone wants. Not everybody can accomplish that. At the very least, as long as the consistency is there for Jonathan Taylor, like, this contract is going to be totally worth it. Because they know how he is when he is playing at his greatest. And there aren't too many running backs better than Jonathan Taylor when he is playing at his greatest. Say that just in time. JT is one of the best running backs in the NFL when he is playing at the peak of his powers. There are not many better at the position. And that's why this is the contract he has received. Well earned for the man. But moving on from that, and speaking of the division rival Texans, they signed linebacker Henry To'o to a 2-year, $16 million contract extension. And for him, he's asserted himself as a pretty solid inside linebacker, if you will, for this Texans team. Yes, as they are constructed, the defense is very stacked. And you're probably not asking To'o to do that much or put in as much weight for the defense as you would ask some of the other players on the team. At the same time, with what they need from him, he's excelled. Last year, in a season where he played all 17 games and started 14, he put up a career high in pass deflections with 4, recovered a fumble, had 2.5 sacks, and also logged 95 tackles on the year with 9 tackles for loss. So that man was just a heat-seeking missile in the box each and every single week. And when you're dealing with other guys around him who are just bull rushers, and Hunter and Anderson Jr., who are headhunters, like Jalen Petre legally and Azeez Al-Shire illegally, to have dynamic cornerbacks on the outside in the ball-hawking Derek Stingley Jr. and the physically gifted Kamari Lassiter on the other end, it's going to make the job you need to work on in tandem with that a little bit easier. Toto can't blame his, situation on that, right? All he can do is play within his role, and he has done so at a high level, enough to where the Texans are saying that, hey, we are still going to get you paid. Now, it might not be at the same level as some of your peers, but best believe we are going to compensate you accordingly for what you've done for the team so far. It's also worth noting that the man, when it comes to playoff time especially, he does step his game up from what I'm seeing, especially when they made the playoffs in 24 and 25. He steps it up, at least on the basis of averages. So that's always something you love to see as well. And who knows, with him back there manning the middle, if things had gone a little bit better for them overall, Texans probably could have been a candidate to be in the Super Bowl. And maybe that game, considering how the October matchup versus the Seahawks went, things could have been a little different if the Texans might have been in that game. They just needed a lot of other things to work out for it. It did not happen, unfortunately. And again, Toto is not to blame for that. You're paying him for his role. So that is a deal that is honestly great for him. And honestly, I would expect him to see more overall contributions here. Maybe an uptick in production. I mean, he does that last year while only starting in 14 games compared to the 15 he had in 2024 in terms of starts. So who's to say that when it comes time to put those pads on and step foot on that field, that he doesn't up his game even more? That's just a valid question to ask. He's very young too. He'll be entering his age 25 year. And the sky is just, frankly, the limit for this Texans defense in general. They're so young. Everybody is still so young at this point, and they still got room to potentially grow as players in their own respects. Just because Toto is there doesn't mean he is finished learning everything there is to learn about playing the position, about potentially shadowing roles for other positions to, play out of rhythm at times and, just freelance at times while improvising on the spot as a linebacker. You can call the plays out. They're not always going to go according to plan. A lot of opportunity for Toto to take a big jump. But moving on from that, I mentioned that, one of the marquee players, if you will, for the Lions had not been participating for a while, which is part of the reason why they were so thin in the running back group for training camp to this point. Noted by getting Raheem Blackshear, as I mentioned earlier. That marquee player happened to be Jahmyr Gibbs at this point. As early in the week per Adam Schefter, it was mentioned constantly that, with Bijan Robinson getting his deal, the Titans, the Lions rather, and the Colts were going to be on the block for running back contracts. Admittedly, with Taylor getting his, might have been speeding up a little bit in that Detroit locker room and that Detroit front office. Who's to say? We've been talking about it all offseason long. The idea that, Jahmyr Gibbs could be a guy who is worth gaining for even more money than that of the likes of Bijan Robinson and other running backs who were due up this offseason. We've also said it several times. The fact that these are real conversations where, there was a time that running backs weren't even considered to be worth over $10 million in total. Now we're talking about $20 plus million per year deals, and we're talking about guys close to that mark as well, like James Cook the third, like Christian McCaffrey, a lot of different running backs, Saquon Barkley, even Derrick Henry, past his 30s, getting paid with a 2-year contract extension worth a lot of money on his end. This was a bit of a foreign conversation and something that people had never expected. Now that we're here, you have this just happening back to back to back as the dominoes continue to fall. And it left Jahmyr Gibbs still standing, with him yesterday being signed by the Lions to a 3-year, $75.75 million deal, or at least a $67.5 million deal that can be worth up to that, and with $51.5 million guaranteed, giving him the richest overall contract by annual salary at the running back position in NFL history, just a few days after Bijan Robinson himself set that mark. You think about it like that shit is crazy. It took them absolutely no time. We get these news about Jahmyr Gibbs holding in and just, refraining from stepping on the field to practice at all while this was getting negotiated, and it ended up giving him the largest contract out of any. That is just a very crazy turnaround. A similar situation here. There is nothing to contrast about Jahmyr Gibbs' deal here. Similarly, with Jahmyr Gibbs having his draft rights traded ultimately for the Falcons to then get Bijan Robinson with their pick. I'm telling you, it is still a deal that will go down as a win-win move. So many people were frustrated and pissed the fuck off at the fact that this man was traded away from that team for them to have Bijan Robinson, because Lions fans wanted the former, and it turns out that, both of them are pretty fucking good. Some people consider that Bijan Robinson is a little bit inferior to Jahmyr Gibbs. This is where we are now. This is a brand new day and age for the running back in the league. Because when you have those who aren't just stuck in their traditional ways anymore, and you have so many coming in the league now who can act as pass catchers out of the backfield, it just adds to their value. I can't even imagine how many times last season that there were games where this man, Jahmyr Gibbs, in what was another very great year for him overall, had games with at least 90 rushing yards and 60 or so receiving yards out of the backfield. This is the level at which it was getting at. He was getting all the damn targets out of the backfield, and it's easy. All you have to do is put the man in space, and you can ensure that he is going to pretty much make something out of nothing. As tight of a space as possible, no matter. He can slender and slim his way right through it for a first down gain, for a large gain down the field. He can break himself open through the smallest of gaps and in wider space. That in and of itself is asking him to just unload some of the nastiest cutback moves imaginable while freeing himself up and literally making defenders slam into each other as they all trail him the second he gets past you and your last line of defense. It can happen in a matter of 2.5 seconds, and there is no catching up to him once he's gone. The Giants would know about that. And a whole hell of a lot. And a lot of teams caught on to that as well. Now, again, I'm not debating this at all. Jahmyr Gibbs, after 3 years where he literally broke the franchise record for most touchdowns in their first 3 seasons total over the great Barry Sanders, a guy that is regarded as one of the best running backs of all time, if not the best running back of all time, who had his career, unfortunately, end early due to retirement because of how shit the Lions were in the early to late 1990s. Well, you are already on legendary pace to turn yourself into one of the best running backs of all time. And Gibbs is just getting started. Like, he has just turned 24. He will be entering his season at such a young age. So there is still so much time for him to add even more to that distribution of play, because it is absolutely ridiculous. And it is a spectacle to watch every time that he's on the field. Like, you know, that combination of speed and body control, even for a player who is a bit on the smaller end, it hasn't mattered for him, because he is one man on a Lions offense that is, again, rife with talent. Sam Laporta, Jamison Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, all have gotten their contract extensions. So has Penei Sewell. So is Jared Goff. Great talent surrounding him. And yet he is still sticking out above all the rest, because he's that much of a threat as an overall player, let alone just a runner, let alone just a pass catcher out of the backfield. It got to the point where teams over the past couple of years have said to themselves in these war rooms that if you stop Jahmyr Gibbs, you cut off the entire flow of the Lions offense. Because again, it's a matter of the threat of the run. That dominating run. Especially when they had the two-headed monster in he and David Montgomery. The threat of the run opened up the pass to one of the greatest levels you will ever see on an NFL game and of all time. Across the seasons. This is how it works. And when that did happen, some of those teams would be proven right. There have been games where this Lions team, for as dominant as they can be offensively, when they cannot establish the run, when they decide to load up the box and stack big body after big body just to watch Jahmyr Gibbs up the middle or stop him as soon as he tries to bounce it outside, they genuinely have struggled. Look no further than the game against the Commanders in the divisional round in 2025, technically speaking. They struggled to establish the run early, they trailed early, and were ultimately not able to recover in that game. That's before you even get into the games last year. I mean, he himself had a streak of really great games. And similarly, in November, in Week 12 against the Giants, that man walked it off with a 60-plus yard touchdown run to cap off that game in one of the best moments of the season. A damn near 70-yard run to close out that fucking game, pretty much. Legendary type stuff. One of the best performances he'd had in his career and the best of his season to that point. One that, again, had already been pretty damn good on paper. Then you get into every single week following after that. And I just need you to pay attention to how things went. Okay? He had 20 rushes for 68 yards against the Packers. They lost. 12 rushes for 43 yards against the Cowboys. They won. And he proceeded to have 3 rushing touchdowns with 77 rushing yards. He had 38 rushing yards against the Rams. They lost by 7 in a shootout. He had 2 rushing yards on 7 carries against the Steelers. And it came down to them losing on the final play of the game. Still, they lost against the Vikings of all teams with him having 41 rushing yards on 17 carries. And they won against the Bears in the final week after not qualifying for the playoffs after he rushed for 80 yards on 19 carries and had a receiving touchdown. So again, no game over 80 yards in the final 6 weeks of the season. His worst rushing performance in his career in the game against the Steelers by far. Although again, he also had 66 receiving yards and a touchdown in that game. They weren't able to do anything else. They were one-dimensional, and as a result, they struggled to even scrape out these pair of wins against the Cowboys and Bears in this time frame. They had to fight tooth and nail just to get there. That Christmas Day game against the Vikings was an abject disaster in that game. Also with the fact that in the last couple of games there, the Steelers game, the Vikings game, he actually had his first 2 fumbles on the year as well. So again, if people are going to, have their own qualms about the contract, they're going to key in on those last 6 games of the regular season. At the same time, they still all prove that even if you contain Gibbs somehow, you are going to those lengths in order to make it happen. And it is still not a full guarantee that it will help you, because he is a player who is still that great enough to where he can get his in another element of the game. Or he'll do enough to open up the threat of any other one of those players that I just named burn you down the field, or burn you in the short game, or route you up in the intermediate game. It is just a ripple effect on how this team performs just by Jahmyr Gibbs being out there. And that is why he has now reset the market at the running back position. Not by much, but he can say that about himself now. So now he'll be back out there trying to put together another spectacular season. He's done all this before he is even able to turn 25 years old. Just think about that. That's insane. It's insane, man. Genuinely, bro. I'll tell you, man. And then the Bills today signed O'Cyrus Torrence to a 4-year, $78.4 million contract extension with $46 million guaranteed, per Adam Schefter, making him the 7th richest guard in the league. Kind of a similar situation to Darnell Wright. This is a guy in O'Cyrus Torrence. I believe he was a part of those Georgia teams that went back-to-back in regards to national championship wins. And he teamed back up in Buffalo with James Cook III yet again, as the Bills have consistently been one of the best overall rushing teams in the league. And it's somewhat close, but not really. Like, they are on an entirely different level when it comes to their efficiency in the run game. Yes, it helps to have a running back as great as James Cook III is, as well as a running back like build in Josh Allen, okay, consistently mowing down defenders with the sneak, and sometimes by scrambling out of the pocket and picking up yards that way for massive gains down the field, or just simply touchdowns and first down gains. One of the more unstoppable plays in football. Yet they're not going to try to ban that, because again, you're using that to your advantage. It helps all the time when you're dealing with plays like that, the quarterback sneak, the tush push, if you will, from the Eagles. You need that center of gravity being used against the defender, and you need that ultimate collapse from the offensive line to literally sink them under the play and get the leverage they need to pick up the yardage. O'Cyrus Torrence is a man who stands at 6'5", 347. And you're telling me that this man is on the interior of the offensive line. As much as you may want to, come after the Bills for constantly utilizing these quarterback sneaks with Josh Allen, if you have a person up the middle weighing 347 and standing at 6'5", I believe that you're going to want to run behind them and anybody else looking like that each and every single time. O'Cyrus Torrence playing at that level and also being pretty good as a pass blocker makes his contract all the more worth it. It's a well-deserved deal for him because for him to be a second rounder and establish himself as one of the more reliable guards in the league, it's not an easy task to pull off for just any offensive lineman out there. Plus, the trust for him has always been there. This is his second season, 2025, in which he not only played all 17 games, he also appeared in all the offensive snaps. As much as, injuries are a part of the game, and sure, you want to have contingency plans in case and extra bodies on your offensive line in case things go wrong, it helps Torrance's case that man has been as reliable as he's been and also that damn durable to not miss a single snap last year or in his rookie season. And he's done this in just his first 3 years as a player. You better go ahead and pay up for that because it matters. I'm not going to say that you can't put a price tag on it, but obviously being available and constantly out there on the field, that is the only way that you can get the most out of a player. And he's clearly showcased that at an elite level. So, here is to another few years or so of him literally blocking and just bullying interior defensive linemen out of the way so that Josh Allen can pick up more first downs and potentially vulture some more touchdowns. But, let me see, is there anything else at this point, aside from more news about all this NFL Top 100 stuff, which honestly, I'm not worried all that much about getting into. Though some of the things have apparently been very disrespectful to this point about the rankings. I could have a field day with that, but again, not going to worry about that all too much. Okay, yeah, that looks like everything. So, that will do it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Admittedly, a much lighter one. Focused more on the positives compared to some of the others. So, it's definitely good to have that change. But, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.